What's it like being married to a cruel, manipulative woman? Is it a dance with danger, exciting yet risky? Or is it a life of endless anxiety, where you can't even rest peacefully? My spouse, Sarah, and I have been together for half a decade, but she's always scheming against me. Our relationship truly shattered when she tried to destroy my reputation. She arranged for me and a young woman to be in a hotel, drugged our beverages, and then alerted the press to photograph us. I was dumbfounded, evicted from my own house without a single possession. Ultimately, I supposedly perished in a road collision. But what everyone missed was that the young woman was actually Miss Thompson's child, Emily. A powerful figure in both legitimate and illicit circles, a genuine woman of danger. Following my supposed demise, she went on a rampage, her eyes red with fury, before ending her own existence. And that's when I was resurrected, sent back to that pivotal evening. I awoke to find a beautiful stranger's face very near mine, her intoxicating breath on my skin. A thrilling feeling coursed through me. I tried shaking my head to clear the fog, but the lightheadedness persisted. The subdued lighting and the partially undressed woman embracing me made my head whirl. The heat intensified, and my body felt like it was on fire. Returning to this exact point, the allure was almost too much. Base urges challenged my remaining self-control. Suddenly, she opened her eyes and met my gaze, jolting me back to reality. I quickly stammered, "Hold on, let me clarify. I'm trying to stay composed, pulling the covers over her. Someone used substances to impair us, to set me up. Miss, we're both innocent here." She looked at me lazily, then down at herself, her cheeks immediately turning crimson. In a panic, she hid beneath the blanket, only her striking eyes visible. She exclaimed, "That's a lie. I'm sure you're the one who did this. You waited for me to wake up to say that. Leave immediately or I'm contacting law enforcement." I raised my left hand, revealing my band of matrimony, and said with a touch of bitterness, "Just a moment, a woman is about to barge in with a camera. If you doubt me, just wait." She gave me a skeptical look, then went quiet. I struggled to stand, dressed myself, grabbed my cellular phone, and rushed out. I used the lift to go down and was almost out when I noticed my spouse, Rachel, looking worried at the reception area, speaking with someone. The man beside her was my supposed best friend, John Miller. At that instant, he reached out and casually placed his arm around her shoulders. Rachel and I transitioned from university days to marriage. For a considerable time afterward, we were the ideal pair, showing affection and regard for each other. Rachel loved to flaunt our relationship online, sharing pictures of everything from the meals she prepared for me to the thoughtful presents I selected for her. She frequently posted about our happy times, letting everyone see her deep affection for me. At that period, I only wished to ensure she never experienced hardship, to keep my pledge of securing her well-being. I toiled endlessly, even ruthlessly, in pursuit of achievement, ready to do anything for financial gain. Everyone believed I had the perfect life, a thriving profession and a devoted spouse. Even I, calmed by ease, gradually lowered my guard and became overconfident. What I failed to realize was that Rachel was the real cold-hearted manipulator. She carefully orchestrated the entire infidelity setup, beginning with the facade of a devoted partner and culminating in the portrayal of a callous individual. The mortifying recollection of that day was now fragmented. A business supper, Miller's prized bottle of spirits, the glance he exchanged with his female associate, the unavoidable toast, and the daring woman who entered the incorrect private room and immediately penalized herself with multiple drinks. It was a mere small amount of alcohol. Yet, that night, I almost lost consciousness. All I recall is desperately yearning for the scent of a woman's delicate skin. Even when the entry was forced open and Rachel struck me, I felt detached, apathetic. It resembled a bizarre fantasy, until I awoke. And that's when the conflict commenced. Images and clips spread rapidly online. Countless individuals demanded more. The weight of public opinion and online harassment cost me my position, one I had struggled for years to achieve. and the union I treasured most. The cruel truth gave me no opportunity to recover. An abrupt road incident ended my existence. In my final moments, I witnessed Rachel and my closest friend Miller's embrace. Their expressions showed no sadness. Miller bent down, knelt, and smirked as he closed my eyes with his palm. His voice was raspy as he uttered, "I planned everything. Didn't think you'd conclude it so soon. What a steal for you." It was ridiculous. He had been with me from his intern days. I mentored him. Gradually, from a junior assistant, he rose through the organization to a supervisory role. There were numerous women around him, yet he stayed unmarried. I had questioned his preferences more than once. But I never imagined the object of his affection was my own spouse, Rachel. A part of my spirit floated away, akin to a released balloon. I believed I was about to vanish, but at that instant, a chilly wind from the north pushed me downwards, tethering me to the highest level of the Thompson Corporation structure. That's when I understood that the woman I'd spent a passionate night with was Miss Thompson's offspring, Emily. I also learned that, like me, she had endured relentless defamation and disgrace in recent days. The Thompson Corporation's stock plummeted. In her anguish, she even contemplated ending her life, but she couldn't depart so easily. The animosity in her heart sustained her. She despised me so intensely that she wished me eternal unrest, even in the afterlife. I suppose that's why I couldn't depart. But upon learning the reality, she, along with me, commenced a journey of fierce retribution. Miller became addicted to betting, and Rachel developed a medical condition. When everything settled, she poured 2 glasses of liquor on my burial site, one carried by the breeze, the other consumed by it. But no one could escape unscathed. At the instant when resentment disappeared, she lost all purpose. A sudden wind from the south swept across the rooftop, marking my ultimate attempt to restrain her. But in the end, I failed. Just before she impacted the ground, I was rejuvenated. Thoughts started to solidify. I stumbled out of the hotel's service entrance. Emily was likely still getting dressed, unable to pursue me in time. And this time, Rachel wouldn't manage to collect any incriminating proof. I summoned a vehicle for hire to return home. In the automobile, I accessed a food ordering application and selected a variety of proteins and produce. Time for my act to begin. As anticipated, Rachel telephoned. Her voice was laced with suppressed annoyance as she inquired, "Where have you gone?" I moderated my tone and responded softly, "I'm at our residence, my dear. What is it?" There was a hesitation on the other end. Then she stated, "I couldn't locate you at your workplace. Miller is present, so I requested he accompany me home." After concluding the call, I exited the washroom. I had vomited several times before my hazy mind cleared somewhat. By the time Rachel arrived, I had already commenced meal preparation. She regarded me with doubt and inquired, "Why are you preparing the meal? Miller mentioned you attended a social function." Miller, entering behind her, greeted me with the cooked dish in his grasp. I gave him a discreet look, and as usual, he responded with a grin and played along. He remarked, "Sister-in-law, Robert must have been missing you. He truly understands how to nurture." At that instant, I couldn't help but admire him. An individual's acting prowess can truly be impeccable. On the surface, Miller was courteous, even deferential towards me, but in truth, he harbored deep resentment. I suddenly yearned to discover how far things had progressed between Rachel and him. After all, in my recollection, Rachel detested him. She had explicitly stated that Miller was childish, like a younger sibling in all his actions, and she saw no benefit in my continued guidance of him. Utterly a waste of effort. I'm unsure when, but her attitude towards him had transformed. During the meal, Miller positioned himself opposite Rachel and me, consuming his food and occasionally lauding my culinary skills. Rachel teased, "Don't overlook who instructed him." She positioned herself beside me, flirtatiously praising her own contributions. I detected something peculiar about her physical posture. So I casually continued eating, and with my other hand, I discreetly captured an image beneath the table. Then I stated, "I'm experiencing some lightheadedness. I vomited repeatedly upon returning home. You two can take your time." I don't await a reply, swiftly entering the bedroom and securing the door. I accessed my photo collection and observed Rachel's small foot intertwined with Miller's limb. The two were becoming intimate beneath the table. A man's pride in that moment was completely demolished. If it weren't for Miller's incitement before my demise in my previous existence, I would have believed that I was the one who wronged Rachel, that I was the one betraying my marital vows. I balled my hands into fists, veins protruding, striving to contain the fury and exasperation surging within me. I desired nothing more than to confront them both and terminate everything then and there. But that would be too lenient for them. Besides, being resurrected was for my own atonement, not to plunge back into the chasm. I deliberated for a considerable time before devising a cunning strategy. I reclined in bed, feigning slumber until Rachel completed her shower and lay beside me. I pretended to awaken, then reached my hand along her shapely figure. She swiftly suppressed my hand and whispered, "Dearest, not now. It's my time of the month." I retracted my hand and placed it gently on her abdomen, regarding her with genuine apprehension. "Are you in pain? Shall I prepare some warm beverage for you?" After all these years, my increasingly demanding occupation had caused me to overlook her, and in her perception, I likely wasn't a commendable spouse any longer. Every day, I was either traveling for work or returning home inebriated. I was too preoccupied to even follow through on the arrangement we had made when we were newlyweds, to have 2 offspring. I knew she harbored grievances, but that shouldn't be an excuse for her infidelity. If she disliked this existence, if she disliked me, she should have communicated with me. We could have parted amicably. She should have known that all my endeavors, all the wealth I accumulated were for her, the woman who had been with me through every challenge since our university days. I never withheld a single coin when it came to her, but instead, she opted to collaborate with my closest companion to betray me, disregarding all the prior connection we shared. So now I would make her fall in love with me once more, to the extent of obsession, to the point where she would be prepared to sacrifice everything, even her self-respect, for me. And when she adored me the most, when she was madly infatuated with me, I would abandon her like discarded waste. I yearned for her to undergo the sensation of being betrayed by a beloved, the sensation of existence being worse than demise. I softly caressed her abdomen while my other hand encircled her, and I gazed into her eyes as I inquired, "Are you feeling somewhat improved?" Her body was rigid, but her tone softened noticeably. She responded, "Indeed, thank you, my love." Her voice still seemed aloof, and I suspected she had made some commitment to Miller, which was why she was so averse to me. The subsequent moment, I kissed her forehead gently and stated, "My dear, I've consistently overlooked your sentiments, and it's my shortcoming. Now I comprehend that nothing surpasses you in importance. Thus, I'll delegate the upcoming work journey to Miller, and I'll remain and dedicate time to you." She furrowed her brow as if grappling internally for a moment, but still remarked, "But dearest, Miller's capabilities are not as refined as yours. I believe it's preferable if you undertake it. Do not postpone the significant matters. Wouldn't you concur?" I smirked inwardly, but my expression remained full of affection. I stated, "Behave, my dear. I've meticulously planned everything. Have faith in me." Afterward, I rose from the bed and wiped my mouth in a location where she couldn't observe. The kiss, after learning the truth, only evoked a sense of revulsion. A while later, I brought the specially prepared brown sugar drink and opened the door to the chamber. I knelt by the bed and said, "My love, consume some of this and enjoy a restful night's slumber." Her eyes displayed a flicker of astonishment as she accepted the spoon and imbibed a few mouthfuls. Then she inquired, Why are you suddenly exhibiting such kindness to me?" I gazed at her adoringly and smiled radiantly. "I've been contemplating. I used to be engrossed in earning wealth, believing that affluence would bring you joy. But from this moment forward, I'll transform. I'll provide you with financial security, but affection and consideration can never be deficient." Rachel smiled as well. That smile appeared joyous, but it also concealed a trace of remorse that was difficult to mask. The subsequent day, at the organization's morning assembly, Miller occupied the rearmost seat, diligently working. To be candid, if it weren't for my intervention, he wouldn't even have had the opportunity to be present at the table. Now, clutching his notebook, he was completely engrossed in heeding my address, occasionally jotting down notes. He resembled the quintessential employee. Each time I articulated an opinion, he would invariably be the first to rise and applaud, exaggerating his commendation. A few times, his accolades were so excessive that they induced discomfort in me. He used to consistently engage in this behavior, and I simply perceived it as authentic admiration and reverence. Although it was slightly ungainly, I tolerated it. It wasn't until now that I noticed the other colleagues' expressions always seemed so unnatural. At the conclusion of the assembly, I reassigned his responsibilities. Smiling, I stated, "Miller, swiftly prepare the necessary documents and secure the travel arrangements. This work journey is your prospect to exhibit your proficiency. No issues, correct?" He responded, "Hold on, Robert, am I undertaking this solo? What about your involvement?" He stared at me, perplexed. I tapped the table and stated, "If you encounter any obstacles, feel free to raise them, but resolve them independently. Incidentally, within the organization, there's only Mr. Jones, not Robert. In the future, it's advisable to deliberate before speaking." My frigid tone induced a degree of embarrassment in him. The colleagues exchanged glances and whispered. Miller gritted his teeth and responded quietly, "Understood, Mr. Jones." As soon as I returned to the office and took my seat, he knocked on the door, holding a cup of coffee, and with a fawning tone, he said, "Mr. Jones, regarding the previous evening. It should have been my responsibility to escort you home, but I experienced an excruciating stomach ailment and had to rush to the restroom. When I returned, you had already departed. You're not harboring any resentment about this, are you?" Perceiving his inept attempt at flattery, I smiled as I accepted the coffee. I took a small sip and said, "Am I truly that trivial?" After hearing this, he relaxed, scratching his head and smiling foolishly. He truly understood how to navigate the situation. I patted his shoulder and continued, "Everyone at the organization has witnessed the endeavors I've invested in mentoring you. Some individuals will engage in gossip behind your back. This time, you're undertaking the work journey alone. Perform admirably and demonstrate to them that I didn't select the incorrect individual. Comprehended?" He nodded and commenced uttering a plethora of motivational phrases. Finally, he scrutinized my expression to ensure there were no issues before cautiously inquiring, "Robert, yesterday, when I rushed to the restroom, I believe I observed a stunning woman collide with you. Are you unharmed?" I narrowed my eyes and smiled, reminiscing, "Indeed, I've never encountered such an exquisite woman before." But at that instant, my stomach ached so intensely that I had to hasten to the restroom and vomit numerous times. He furrowed his brow slightly, appearing thoughtful and concerned. He inquired, "Was it gastric inflammation? Allow me to procure some medication for you. You should moderate your alcohol consumption and prioritize your well-being." He truly possessed a knack for uttering the appropriate sentiments. I just didn't know if Rachel would still heed him upon his return. While Miller was away on his month-long work journey, I began to contemplate the underlying causes of the alteration in my relationship with Rachel. I employed every conceivable method to win her back. I invited her to revisit the university campus, strolling together beneath the verdant banyan trees. Walking leisurely beside her, I gently nudged her shoulder and said, "Rachel, I've heard numerous young men are vying for your attention. Should I commence queuing for the opportunity?" The woman, bathed in the interplay of light and shadow, seemed momentarily dazed. Then, in a playful tone, she pouted and said, "You truly possess a way with words. I'll reward you with a small sum." I seized the opportunity to link her arm with mine. Our fingers entwined. In the stillness, it felt as if time momentarily paused. I could discern the faint smile in her eyes and the subtle inebriation. Not only that, I also accompanied her to amusement parks, renowned tourist destinations, and fashionable dining establishments. I even meticulously studied optimal photographic angles online. I captured treasure-worthy images of her, ideal for her social media platforms. With my meticulous attention and companionship, our relationship swiftly rekindled. We strolled through bustling throngs, and she would actively link her arm through mine, reminiscent of the sweet days of our courtship. But Rachel, the hand-holding, embracing, and romance we now shared were all predicated on a robust financial foundation. Don't you comprehend the adage? Poverty exacerbates all difficulties? I utilized your affection as my impetus to strive diligently to furnish the existence you desired. Marriage is not solely about remaining in a bubble of perpetual love. It's about trust, maturation, and challenges. Rachel still occasionally exhibited subtle expressions as she responded to messages beside me. At the dinner table, when I reached for a napkin, she suddenly reacted protectively, clutching her phone and awkwardly explaining, "It's my closest companion, the one you're familiar with. She's been experiencing a difficult time recently, sending me lengthy texts to vent. I can't disregard them. Can you comprehend, darling?" I knew precisely who she was communicating with. I pretended to reach for her phone and said, "Just reply swiftly, I'll assist you." She hastily concealed the phone behind her back, smiling awkwardly. "Darling, you wouldn't grasp the confidences between women." And then, as if to reward me, she planted a swift kiss on my cheek. How unfortunate. Sure enough, after some time, Rachel's demeanor towards me improved significantly. The frequency of her chats with that so-called best friend on her phone also gradually diminished. Clearly, Rachel's neglect had made that so-called best friend somewhat agitated. She sent Rachel some photographs of the two of them from the past, threatening her. I just happened to witness it. At that moment, she was in the bathroom showering. The aroma of candles flickered, and the room was permeated with an ambiguous atmosphere. She inquired if I appreciated the new sleepwear she had purchased, the ones I had always favored. To be honest, Rachel was genuinely beautiful. The passage of time had left no blemishes on her face. Instead, her every gesture had acquired a touch of mature allure. She took excellent care of herself and possessed a refined sense of style. When strolling down the street, men would frequently cast glances at her. She also knew how to be playful, how to tantalize me. Rachel's fingertips gently traced my arm, the slight friction of her body allowing me to sense her warmth. A long-lost, unspoken understanding. I knew this was her invitation to express her profound affection for me. But I didn't reciprocate. The next moment, I retrieved my laptop and paused the ambiguous moment. She complained as she leaned over, saying, "Darling, what are you occupied with? At this juncture, you're still preoccupied with work?" I gently stroked her hair, revealing the trump card I had already prepared. I had already bestowed upon her affection and companionship, but something more paramount was ready, something that would truly resonate with her. I showed her the thing that would completely move her, a substantial sum in savings. I said, "Wife, I'm aware you're dissatisfied with your current employment, and you've always aspired to establish your own floral boutique. Now this no longer needs to remain a mere aspiration. Resign from your position. You can utilize these funds to fully conceptualize the career you've always yearned for." She stared at the monetary figure displayed on the screen. She cupped her face with her hands, tears streaming between her fingers. She was so overwhelmed with emotion that she could barely restrain herself, saying, "Darling, you comprehend me so profoundly. I'm so moved. I believe I'm utterly infatuated with you." Boo-hoo. She buried her head in my chest and embraced me tightly. "But I regret to inform you I've come to a realization. Money is for women to observe, not to be expended by them. In my past life, I was on the verge of financial independence. This bonus was something I had intended to surprise her with at the year's end, but she doesn't merit it." After saying that, Rachel once again attempted to entice me. Her hand began to wander lower. I tapped her on the head, feigning seriousness, and said, "Rachel, you're on the cusp of owning your own enterprise. This is a significant investment. Arise swiftly, formulate a plan, and allow me to peruse your concepts." She laughed and said, "Affirmative, Mr. Jones." With that, she confidently dedicated the entire night to composing a plan at the desk. As for me, I slumbered soundly. When Miller returned, he had become significantly darker and appeared exceedingly weary. Though the process wasn't seamless, he still managed to complete the work marginally. I specifically lauded him during the meeting. He grinned broadly, saying, "Not at all, not at all. It's entirely attributable to Mr. Jones's exceptional tutelage." I smiled and offered no response. After work, I arranged a special dinner for him, and all the department colleagues were in attendance. Naturally, I also extended an invitation to Rachel. Miller said, "As you all are aware, the client presented numerous unreasonable stipulations. I frequently had to remain awake all night revising the plans. I truly couldn't differentiate between day and night, and each time I closed my eyes, I simply yearned to return home. But then I contemplated the camaraderie of all of us striving diligently together for this extended family." Miller spoke passionately, holding his wine glass at the dinner table, almost delivering an acceptance speech rather than sharing his work experience. Rachel, attired in a light blue gown, sat adjacent to me. The gown accentuated her snow-like complexion, and her face was even more refined and unblemished. I had specifically requested she dress elegantly, using the pretext of needing her assistance to impress the female colleagues around me who harbored inappropriate thoughts about me. Miller, upon seeing Rachel enter the room, stared at her with widened eyes, his tone becoming more resolute as he said, "In any event, I shall exert even greater effort. Mr. Jones is the individual I hold in the highest esteem, and I shall never disappoint his expectations." Everyone chuckled and applauded, and the atmosphere became animated. Rachel sat beside me, and I deliberately embraced her affectionately in front of everyone. My colleagues chimed in. "Mr. Jones, your spouse is truly stunning. I initially believed a celebrity had graced us with their presence. Indeed, you two are an impeccable pairing, a match ordained by fate." Everyone was showering compliments on Rachel and me. Only Miller lowered his head, silently imbibing. After a couple of sniffs, he suddenly raised his head and said, "Come on, Mr. Jones, Mrs. Jones, permit me to propose a toast to both of you." One glass after another. Miller was openly attempting to outdrink me, seeking to establish some dominance at the dinner table. I played along, linking my arm with his and continuing to drink. I sipped half the glass and discreetly expelled the other half with a towel. When it seemed like it was almost over, I feigned intoxication and the need to vomit, so I excused myself to the restroom and splashed some water on my face. In my mind, I estimated that Miller would undoubtedly make a move tonight. Even if Rachel desired to terminate their relationship, he would likely utilize this as leverage. While I was contemplating, a stunning woman's profile suddenly materialized in the mirror of the men's restroom. I recognized her instantly. It was Miss Emily Thompson. She smirked and teased. "Big guy, I just observed your spouse assisting another man into an automobile. The scene was truly explosive. Care to investigate?" Most of the individuals at the dinner table had already departed. Outside, the rain was pouring torrentially, and the entire city's night was enveloped in a deluge. The frigid autumn air pierced through my chest. Rachel sent me a text message. "Darling, I've arranged transportation for you. Return home first. My closest companion just experienced another romantic dissolution, so I might be slightly delayed. Await me, okay?" Before I could lock the screen, a curious little head appeared in my line of sight. I asked, "What are you engaged in?" I pocketed my phone, feeling somewhat bewildered. When did Emily catch up to me? She eagerly grasped my arm and said, "What are you doing? Let's apprehend them in the act." I was rendered speechless. Why was she so engrossed in gossip? What relevance did it have to her? Then I recalled how, in the past life, she had cursed me to never find tranquility. I pushed her away and said, "Please conduct yourself appropriately." She froze for a moment, then raised her voice. "Can't you converse normally? Are you behaving as if I'm some sort of delinquent? Such a brazen man, reacting so intensely. Could it be that you're homosexual?" She paused for a second, then nodded, saying with certainty, "No wonder last time, when I lay in front of you, you couldn't even muster any excitement." I retorted, Cease your nonsense. Couldn't it be that you simply failed to arouse me? As soon as I uttered those words, I regretted them. After all, she was Emily Thompson. I had such a sharp tongue. Would she seek retribution against me? She glared at me, then said coldly, "Last time I didn't intend to let you off the hook. After you saw me unclothed, I had someone arrange to have your eyes removed. But after observing you for a few days, I realized it's unnecessary. You're already sufficiently blind to not even realize your wife is engaging in infidelity." I was speechless, though I had to concede, in my past life, if I hadn't been blind, how could I have committed such a colossal blunder? How could I have failed to perceive the indicators? How could I have selected a spouse like Rachel and a subordinate like Miller? I sighed deeply. She glanced at me, then suddenly commenced laughing. "Big guy, what's with that expression? Did I frighten you? I'm merely jesting. Don't be apprehensive. Big Sis isn't affiliated with the underworld." This girl, she appeared so much younger than me, but dared to refer to herself as Big Sis. I frowned and proceeded towards the parking area. I simply desired to ascertain how explosive the scene truly was. When I neared Miller's sport utility vehicle, I could discern some sounds emanating from within the vehicle, but I couldn't decipher the words. I crouched down, drawing closer, and retrieved my phone to record. Just as I took a few steps, I heard laughter behind me that she couldn't suppress. I turned around speechlessly and saw Emily holding her mouth, shaking with mirth. I was truly exasperated with her. She transformed a tragic human occurrence into something so gleeful. Just as I was about to reprimand her, a woman's voice emanated from the vehicle. It was Rachel, choking with emotion as she said, "Miller, we can't persist in this manner any longer." There was a slight gasp and she continued, "I've been enduring so much anguish these past few days, I can't betray my spouse." Miller shouted in a lowered voice, "Have you forgotten our scheme? Now you desire to withdraw? Do you believe I'll permit you to depart so readily?" Rachel appeared to be gagged, struggling desperately. "Don't do this, please." Then there was a rustling sound from the car. A moment later, Rachel spoke with a sob in her voice. "I can't continue committing the same transgression. It was my fault previously. I was excessively selfish, treating you as a replacement for him. Now I've realized the individual I've always cherished is my spouse. Please depart, please." Miller said, "Final opportunity. Grant me one more encounter or I'll expose everything between us." Rachel refused. "No, I would rather perish than do that." Then there were more rustling sounds. I lifted my phone. Emily was poking me from behind. She whispered, "I'm genuinely inquisitive. Allow me to observe the expression on your face currently." I was speechless. I couldn't be bothered to respond to her. Everything was prepared, merely awaiting the opportune moment. The next second, I abruptly stood up and kicked the vehicle's window, shattering the glass. Both of them in the car turned to look at me, their eyes filled with panic. I had never seen Rachel like this before. Her face was completely red from shame. She couldn't look me in the eye and was clearly very embarrassed. She stammered in an attempt to explain, "Darling, he's inebriated. I encountered him halfway and he offered to drive me home. He volunteered to take me back." Emily teased, "He was intoxicated and drove you? You two really possess audacity." I couldn't help but sigh inwardly. In my past life, when I was caught with her in bed, Miller had stood there relishing the spectacle and adding fuel to the fire. But Miller wasn't as I had envisioned. He calmly said, "Robert, my sister-in-law confessed her affection for me, so if you seek to apportion blame, direct it towards me." I couldn't resist. Rachel slapped him forcefully, her face flushed with fury as she said, "You're fabricating falsehoods. When did I ever express affection for you?" She tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, and a single tear descended, giving her a pitiful, rain-like appearance. She then said, "Darling, nothing transpired between us." I stepped back and saved the video on my phone. I acted calm and composed as I gently lifted her out of the car, comforting her with, "It's all right, darling, I'm present. I'll escort you home." The other three were frozen in place, especially Emily, who gasped, "Hey, are you out of your mind? She's been deceiving you, engaging in marital infidelity, and you simply let it pass? What kind of individual are you? Are you a turtle or something?" I ignored her. In the rain, I hailed a taxi. She sat next to me, one hand clutching my shirt sleeve, her lips tightly compressed. When we arrived home, she embraced me from behind and said, "Darling, I'm remorseful. Please believe me, I truly didn't do anything untoward to you." I gave her a disappointed look and asked, "Do you still harbor affection for me? If you do, why would you subject me to this?" She still refused to admit to the affair and attempted to distort the truth. "Darling, I genuinely cherish you. I've always cherished you. It's merely that during that period you were so engrossed in work that you disregarded me. I was so enraged, and Miller exploited that time to draw close to me, comfort me. But nothing genuinely transpired. I sought him out this time to terminate matters, not what you perceived." I slowly pushed her away and sat down on the sofa, lost in thought. I sat there in silence for a while, looking like I was struggling with some internal conflict, about to make a decision. Before I could speak, Rachel half knelt beside me, grasping my hand and choking on her words. "Darling, inform me what I can do for you to forgive me. Please don't abandon me, okay? Grant me an opportunity. Grant our union an opportunity. I vow I'll never communicate with him again. I won't encounter him anymore. I pledge to maintain my distance from all other men. I'll be exceedingly obedient. Just please don't forsake me." At this juncture, it was crucial to guide her gradually, providing some ambiguous hints to make her believe there was still a glimmer of hope. When someone is in this desperate situation, they will grasp that final lifeline. I sighed and gently touched her hand, asking, "Rachel, I'm uncertain if I can trust you once more. You've deceived me so extensively. What kind of response do you anticipate from me? At this juncture, please simply confide in me. Did you genuinely do nothing untoward to me? If you still can't divulge the truth, then all the remaining hope I harbored for you will dissipate. And how can I confront you? Forgive you?" She trembled, looking at me with a mixture of apprehension and unease in her eyes. Deep inside, she was clearly caught in a whirlwind of endless struggle. But in the end, she yielded. She closed her eyes, shaking her head, tears flowing uncontrollably down her face. Her voice quivered as she said, "I'm remorseful." I was exceedingly gratified, but still pressed further. "Remorseful for what?" She bit her lip. "I committed a transgression against you. I've always maintained that an apology must be rooted in genuine words, because that's a signal, a recollection in reality. Numerous times, we may be cognizant deep down that we were mistaken, but we simply refuse to acknowledge the veracity of that error. This internal conflict attenuates the culpability, and the mind instinctively endeavors to rectify the contradiction, selecting the conclusion that benefits us. It even distorts the veracity when our volition is at its weakest, and culpability, akin to a pathogen, is eradicated by the immune system. It's disparate between someone articulating their wrongdoing and someone genuinely believing they are culpable, just like the distinction between genuinely perceiving a crimson mountain and merely envisioning one. An individual must first capitulate on a spiritual level before undertaking action on the material level. I rubbed my temples, speaking slowly and distinctly. "Rachel, my sentiments for you have never wavered since we've been together. Didn't I encounter temptations and trials in my daily work and existence? But because of you, I've never contemplated, uttered, or undertaken anything that would inflict pain upon you. But what about you?" I paused, offering a bitter smile, and continued, "At times I genuinely feel like a failure. Even though you've committed so many transgressions against me, I still can't relinquish the years of shared sentiments we've accumulated. Perhaps I still cherish you, but I genuinely can't trust you any longer. All along, I've trusted you unconditionally, relinquishing every penny I've earned to you, all to furnish you with a sense of security. But you opted to betray our affection, to betray my trust. Rachel, grant me some time to deliberate on this," I added. Direct and blunt words could easily raise alarm, so I knew this was just the right moment. Over the next period, I would make her endure, waiting in full anticipation, only to confront utter despair. As expected, she said, "Darling, I shall demonstrate to you the depth of my affection." She wiped away her tears in secret and proceeded towards the room, each step feeling weightier than the last. I entered the study and secured the door behind me. When Rachel transferred all her funds into my account, I finally exhaled a sigh of relief. She said, "Darling, in the past, you trusted and cherished me unconditionally. I'm prepared to relinquish everything I possess to you, leaving no recourse for myself. Perhaps I don't merit your forgiveness currently, but in the days to come, I'll dedicate my existence to atoning for it." I accepted gladly, shedding feigned tears of gratitude. From that moment onward, I began to treat her coldly and warmly in turn, as if I didn't know how to confront her. Sometimes I would flash her a smile, making her believe everything could return to normalcy. Other times, I would fabricate excuses to turn cold, employing silence as a form of emotional punishment. For instance, on the initial day, I deactivated her credit card, but on the subsequent day, I acquired a gift she had long desired. Or I would sell her vehicle one day and then commence collecting her from her place of employment the next day. In this contest of wills, she progressively became more submissive. Once an individual who wouldn't even contribute to household chores, she now prepared 3 meals daily for me and attended to the domestic duties without complaint, ensuring everything was meticulously arranged. She also adopted a more humble demeanor. My slightest gesture, my utterances, or even a sigh would stir her delicate emotions. On one occasion, I was merely seated on the sofa, silently abstaining from consuming the meal she had prepared, and she knelt beside me, nearly in tears, imploring me to articulate what was amiss, pleading for elucidation. As for Miller, his resilience was remarkable. He persisted in working, delivering tea to me and constantly flattering me at the office. Finally, in front of everyone at a meeting, I terminated his employment. Miller angrily slammed his hand on the table, discarding the facade. "What do you perceive yourself to be? You're dismissing me. I've been toiling diligently for years, and if you're utilizing this as an occasion to settle old scores, fine. I'll expose you, and no one will emerge from this unscathed." The room filled with murmurs, and several individuals frowned. "Miller, cease your unreasonableness. Mr. Jones wouldn't terminate your employment without justification. Indeed, Mr. Jones has always taken care of you, and you're merely attempting to exploit the situation. I've been intending to articulate this for a while. You're unreliable, and you bully the newly hired. Have some decency." I took a sip of water and calmly stated, "You've repeatedly forged my signature and made decisions on my behalf, which resulted in financial losses for the company. If that's insufficient, should I enumerate other matters?" He was infuriated, his face crimson with embarrassment, and he shouted, "You're uttering nonsense. Those were merely insignificant contracts. After all these years of working for you, are you insinuating I'm targeting you merely because I engaged in intimacy with your spouse?" The room fell silent, and everyone turned to regard me. I raised an eyebrow and retrieved my phone, inquiring, "So you're still maintaining contact with her?" He gritted his teeth and nodded. "Undoubtedly. Your spouse can't get enough of me. She's been imploring me to visit her at your residence." I gestured for security to escort him out of the office. Dealing with an individual like him necessitated a distinct approach. While Rachel required emotional stimulation to be subdued, Miller, a rogue, needed to be dealt with ruthlessly. No room for vacillation. I saved the recording and proceeded with my strategy. The evening glow resembled a delicate oil painting. Emily came to locate me. I had taken some time off and was occupied with furnishing my new abode. She teased, "Impressive. You truly possess a cunning intellect. You've cleared out everything, transferred your assets, and yet your spouse is still seated at the restaurant anticipating a romantic dinner with you." I had previously informed Rachel that we would dine together. In reality, I had already arranged for the movers to swiftly remove my belongings. During this time, Rachel was in anguish and remorse, speaking cautiously. almost as if every utterance she made was an error. She was eager to mend our relationship, firmly believing that if she could touch my heart, I would forgive her for this transgression. I smiled. It's all about collaboration. After all, the court wouldn't grant her full custody and permit her to depart with everything merely because she engaged in infidelity. Without your assistance, none of this would have been feasible. I was genuinely grateful to Emily. Since the last time we were plotted against, she had been aiding me in investigating discreetly and evaluating the liquidation of assets. She was resourceful, astute, and as cunning as I was. Meanwhile, Rachel was still alone at the restaurant, transmitting messages to me, inquiring when I would arrive. I disregarded the repeated calls and blocked her number. Emily shrugged and said, "You truly are patient. I'd be yearning to slap her multiple times. You're something else, tormenting her mentally, providing her with hope, then shattering it and pursuing the divorce in such a dramatic manner. Frightening." Then Emily's tone shifted and she frowned at me. "But if you hadn't been procrastinating, I would have already summoned someone to deal with them." Emily still harbored resentment from the previous incident. She had inadvertently entered the incorrect private room at a gathering, imbibed 3 glasses of wine that weren't intended for her, and was nearly deceived by Miller into creating a significant predicament with me. She paused for a moment before continuing. "Fortunately, you didn't dare to touch me. Otherwise, I would have extracted your eyes." I smiled wryly at her sharp features. Any man who could restrain himself back then must be a deity. She quickly averted her gaze, her cheeks turning pink. After I blocked Rachel, I received updates from her closest companion. She informed me that when Rachel returned to the vacant house and observed the divorce documents, she went into a frenzy, weeping throughout the night, searching for me everywhere. At the office, at the educational institution, and even at the hotels I used to frequent. Rachel couldn't locate me anywhere and ultimately ended up crouching in the middle of a crossroads in despair. If it hadn't been for her companion intervening, she might have been involved in a vehicular accident and transported to the hospital by now. Her companion implored me to meet with her. She said, "You've endured so much together. Even if you've resolved to part ways, it's only equitable that you meet and bid farewell in person." I refused. "I'll meet with her, but only on the day of the divorce." Seeing that she couldn't alter my decision, Rachel ultimately concurred. On the day of the divorce, I encountered Rachel. She was attired in large, dark-rimmed spectacles, so her expression was difficult to discern. Her diminutive frame stood by the roadside, as if a gentle breeze would topple her over. She hoarsely said, "You finally consented to meet me. I'll relinquish everything I possess to you. I don't desire anything in return. You can take the residence, and if you wish, you can even have my life. I simply don't want to dissolve our marriage. Please don't abandon me." I shook my head. "Rachel, it's concluded." She was silent for a moment, and then tears began to cascade from her pale cheeks. She said, "I merely want to hear you articulate that you no longer cherish me." I replied, "I no longer cherish you." I answered swiftly, resolutely. It was as if the final vestige of strength had been drained from her. Her body wobbled slightly as she slowly ambled alongside me. I anticipated she would resist, refusing to sign the documents. But she didn't. She signed the divorce agreement, consenting to the condition of departing with nothing. As she sat on the bench, awaiting her turn, she removed her spectacles. Her swollen eyes gazed blankly into the distance, and she said, "If I could reverse time, I would never commit this error." But there are no ifs. After signing the documents, I experienced a peculiar sense of liberation. Rachel was still beside me. I should have restrained my exhilaration, but unfortunately she perceived my mood and her eyes reddened as she said, "Do you truly despise me this intensely? Why won't you even grant me one final opportunity?" I sighed and spoke softly. "I granted you an opportunity, but you failed to treasure it." When Miller's recording played, her face drained of color. She repeated, "How could he utter that? How could he utter that?" Then a flicker of madness appeared in her eyes. She grasped my arm desperately, her voice shrill as she screamed, "Darling, he's fabricating. He's concocting everything. I never communicated with him." I shook my head in disappointment. "Rachel, why are you still deceiving me?" "I'm not deceiving you. Please believe me, darling." I stood up, disengaging her hands from me, my voice frigid. "Rachel, Miller has already divulged everything to me. Is this how you're demonstrating your affection for me?" After that, Rachel didn't come looking for me for a considerable duration, until one afternoon several months later. Rachel appeared at my company. She looked haggard, her eyes vacant. As soon as she saw me, she said, "Robert, will you go see Miller? He's in the hospital and desires to see you." I raised an eyebrow in confusion. Rachel continued, "He's in critical condition and might not survive." I asked, "What transpired?" She explained, "Miller's been stalking me relentlessly, day and night, obstructing my entrance. I'm genuinely weary of it. Do you comprehend that sensation when there's a persistent buzzing sound in your ears? That's what it's been like. He's been standing outside my door, shouting my name incessantly, knocking on my window like a deranged individual. After a while, it appears he's gotten himself entangled with some perilous individuals. It's truly dire. Don't you desire to go see him?" Listening to her rambling, I couldn't help but feel intrigued. I nodded and said, "Fine, I'll go see him." On the hospital bed, Miller was covered with tubes. A white cloth covered his eyes, and when he heard movement, he asked, "Is Robert present?" The aroma of disinfectant in the hospital was pungent and unpleasant. I approached his bed and said, "If you have something to articulate, do so." He fell silent for a while before speaking slowly. "Robert, I'm remorseful. I became disoriented in the moment. I used to admire you. I aspired to be as proficient as you, but I don't know when this admiration transmuted into jealousy. I was envious of your competence at work, envious that you possess a stunning spouse. I kept contemplating how magnificent it would be if Rachel had selected me. At that time, I didn't dare to entertain the notion. But I proceeded and did it. I exploited the misunderstanding between you and her to orchestrate an accidental encounter, attempting to win her over. And I was proud of it. You comprehend that morbid gratification." I interrupted, "I don't have time to listen to your introspection." Miller chuckled weakly, his voice hoarse. "After you terminated my employment, I went to locate Rachel. She wouldn't even cast a glance at me. I was unwilling to accept it. I thought I had already lost my position. I couldn't lose her as well. But she never granted me another opportunity. I'm an obstinate individual. I won't relinquish her, not until my final breath." Rachel stood silently, listening. I asked, bewildered, "What precisely are you endeavoring to convey?" He struggled to shout, "I, Miller, am no inferior to you. I can accomplish everything you can." A puerile outburst. I responded, "Enough, refrain from yelling. You've undertaken actions I couldn't even conceive of, but I certainly don't possess the capacity to dismantle someone else's family. Furthermore, if you survive this, seek mental health evaluation. You're gravely unwell." I turned and exited. Rachel followed me out of the hospital. She said, "The physicians state he'll never regain his sight." I halted her and said, "Are you experiencing remorse for him? If so, why don't you simply become his eyes?" Rachel shook her head urgently, her eyes reddening as she said, "That's not what I intended. Don't you comprehend? I'm merely attempting to demonstrate to you that there's nothing between him and me. I desire to prove to you that I'll undertake anything for you." I disregarded her. She wept as she followed me, saying, "Please, don't be silent. You can reprimand me, I don't care. Why must you subject me to the silent treatment?" No sooner had she spoken than the strident honk of an automobile sounded from the roadside. A blue McLaren was parked, and Emily was seated in the driver's seat, looking out at me. I left Rachel behind without looking back and climbed into the car. She pursued me a few steps but stumbled and fell to the ground with a thud. Her cries grew louder, but I paid no attention. In the rearview mirror, Rachel became increasingly blurry until she was completely out of sight. Emily asked, "So, how does it feel? Quite gratifying, right?" I knew she was doing it intentionally. Perhaps she was experiencing sympathy for me. I sincerely thanked her. Gratitude. Emily laughed lightly. "What's the purpose of a thank you? You can commence by repaying the funds you owe." I was puzzled. "What funds do I owe you?" She smirked. "Are you attempting to evade payment? Last time, you simply donned your attire and fled, and I ended up covering the hotel expenses." I chuckled. Was she genuinely so fixated on the money? "Fine, I'll transfer it to you. But can we simply disregard this? Don't you find it somewhat awkward?" I said. At that moment, Emily and I shared an unspoken understanding, something akin to mutual transparency. She maintained her focus on the road, occasionally casting glances at me. Indeed, it's slightly awkward. I was so enraged back then, I even contemplated extracting your eyes. But when I observed you seated by the roadside that night, appearing so despondent and shattered, I thought you were expiring. I ended up softening my heart. I contemplated it for a moment and replied, "Gratitude for exhibiting mercy." We drove in silence for a while, but I couldn't seem to find a resolution to my musings. Emily's voice interrupted my thoughts. "All right, we've arrived." She parked the automobile by the roadside. When I exited, she called after me, winking as she said, "Enjoy a restful night's slumber. Consider it a rejuvenation for your existence. And don't forget, you still owe me a beverage."